Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here representing Jason Blaha Strength and Fitness, and today I thought I would chat with you guys and gals a little bit about the idea that the harder we train, the less volume that we need. But a quick reminder, if you guys will please click like down below, be greatly appreciated. If you're not subscribed or following, please do so, and if you'll be kind enough to drop me a comment down below, I'd appreciate it so much. Thank you. Let's get over into this topic. All right, and I'm going to kind of go a couple directions with this because, people say things like, how much training volume do you need for growth? And this is why there's so much contention. I'm not even going to get into all the problems with research, but observations in the real world kind of tell us a lot of the same thing. But again, even with studies, the reason it varies so much is that people just don't train that hard, right? And a lot of the researchers conducting the studies, when you watch how some of them train, they don't train that hard. So a lot of times you'll see this stuff with this really high volume training being effective, but it's like, you guys don't really train that hard. And you're the ones who are directing the study. Not going to go into all the detail there, but think about that for a moment. But the reality, when you look at the way the body works, and you start thinking in terms of effective reps, quality reps, total stimulus, obviously the closer we get to failure, the less volume we need. Okay, because usually if we're saying, look, the last few reps before muscle failure are where the muscle growth occurs. Okay, right? And it's not just about the fibers, in a single muscle. I think people get really too caught up with that because they're only thinking in terms of isolation. What about with compound movements? I'm going to go somewhere else with that. What happens is we get closer to failure, even when you look at EMGs, or you get heavier, more muscle activity occurs, meaning heads of muscles and muscles get stimulated to a larger degree. So example, look at any of the various studies on the bench press as they get close to failure, or let's say you take competitive power lifters. All right, there's a good one. When competitive powerlifters have a high neural drive, so therefore every rep is hard. We have to understand what we're saying here. A high degree of effort, and they're usually lifting heavier weights. So if your neural drive is high, you're pushing harder all the time with things, right? So again, higher muscle activation. Well, what happens when they look? The bench press is one of the most beautiful, heavily studied exercises we have. When you're looking at novice lifters, what happens with the bench press? The closer the grip, the more tricep, the wider the grip, the more pec, right? What happens when you look at competitive power lifters? There's no difference, right? A closed medium and a wide grip have the same muscle activity. People say, well, that can't be. Why? That doesn't make any sense, but it does make sense. Higher neural drive, they're pushing harder, they're lifting heavier weights, and they're pushing harder rep for rep. Therefore, there is no longer, hey, this is a chest exercise, hey, this is a lateral head of the tricep exercise, right? That all goes away. That completely goes away. It's just all of them. But also when we look at those studies on mind-muscle connection, for anyone who remembered when those were done, and a lot of the evidence-based people made the same conclusions. They're like, wow. So for mind-muscle connection, if you focused on the chest on the bench press, you got more chest activity. If you focused on the triceps, you got more tricep activity. And if persons did external cueing and they focused on just squeezing the bar hard and pushing as hard as possible, they got more chest and tricep both. All this stuff goes away when you actually train hard. And training hard is not, again, it's not just proximity to failure. Because we're going to go somewhere else. How about the exercises we pick? Okay. This is, again, the problem with how many sets. This is the problem with how many sets. Because exercises are not equal. Effort is not equal. So that's a difference too. Let's think in terms of compound movements, because everyone gets too caught up in the isolation end. But you're only working one muscle. When the compounds come into play, how hard you train set to set matters. But let's think about the effective rep thing. So let's say you're going to do 10 reps a week, 10 sets a week for a muscle. Okay, let's say you're going to do 10 sets a week. If you leave 3 reps in reserve versus if you took them to failure, or 0 reps in reserve, and let's say only the last 5 reps produced a meaningful hypertrophic response. Okay, I think that's fair. I'm not saying it's exactly 5, but let's just say, because we don't know really what it is. It's a nice theory. It's never been proven. Well, if you left 3 reps in reserve, you only got 2 effective reps. Let's say you left 2 reps in reserve, roughly. Okay? That's 30 effective reps, right? 3 effective reps times 10. But if you went to failure, all right, see where we're about to go. If you went to failure, you got 50 from the same number of sets. Are they equal? No. It's almost double the effective volume for the same number of sets. So how many sets do you need? Well, how hard are you training? And then let's take it another way. Do people really think exercises are equal? Right? What happens when, instead of just doing nothing but small movements, because I mean, I isolate biceps right now, of course. Instead of just small movements, what happens when it's big movements, really big movements? Do you not think you're going to get more hypertrophy through the body from a deadlift or a pull-up than you are just a lat pull-down? Or the same thing, let's talk hamstrings. Anybody out there think you can't build massive hamstrings off just a conventional deadlift? Okay. Did anybody actually believe that? You've not been around power. I've seen plenty of guys who only deadlift and don't even do much accessory work for deadlifts who still have massive hamstrings. Okay. So if we're talking total volume, is the volume on a hamstring curl equal to a deadlift? No, of course not. Of course it isn't. I hope you don't think it is. So again, how hard are you training? And that's the point people make. You know, they'll bring up this stuff with the stimulus to fatigue. They'll bring this nonsense up. The problem is the deadlift works everything. Half of the muscle in your body will grow if you did nothing but deadlifts. Over half the muscle in your body would grow from just a deadlift. Okay? So again, it starts counting towards a lot of stuff. So people say, well, how many sets does that count towards? It doesn't matter. That's the beauty of it. If you're training really hard and you know that you're training hard and you have sufficient volume on your deadlift, your squats, you know, your pull-ups, and you know that you're like, man, I'm doing like, 6 hard sets a week of all these exercises. Like really hard sets, close to failure with heavy weights, high neural drive. Do you not think that you're stimulating a huge amount of growth? Of course you are. So when you are doing that, when you start worrying about, am I getting you're getting an accumulation. I mean, a perfect example, let's say, you do 3 sets of deadlifts every week, really heavy deadlifts, 6 sets of rows, 6 sets of weighted pull-ups, and they're all really hard sets with progressive overload. Does anybody not understand that the entire posterior side of your body, everything from your traps to your calves, is probably going to get significantly bigger? Does it matter? Do you really need to be counting the individual sets at that point? Or are you realizing you're doing a ton of work? You're not sitting around doing it with hamstring curls and lat pull downs and cable straight arm pull downs here. You are using big movements that are working the entire body. You're going to get a carryover to everything. And if they're hard sets with progressive overload, you're going to be stimulating enormous amounts of muscle growth. This whole concept of we need to try to count sets starts going out the window, and it just doesn't matter at that point. Even though we'll say, look, optimal is probably somewhere between 10 and 20, but how much overlap did you just get? Deadlift work the hamstrings? Yes. Technically, does a barbell row work the hamstrings and glutes to some extent? Yes. All those work the lats, different angles and extents. It starts accumulating very, very fast, and bigger movements are going to cause more muscle growth through the entire body. hands down. This is not even debated. This is not even a point of debate or contention. They cause more growth. Full stop. And everybody understands this and knows this. So again, the concept of how much volume do you need, how hard do you train?